Hi, I'm Kevin Tharp. Today, what I'm going to do is I'm going to walk you into some of the advanced tools in OpenBrush. And so what we want to do is, obviously, we want to get into OpenBrush, and then we want to switch to the advanced mode. When you switch to the advanced mode, a couple of things happen, and I'll bounce back and forth here. But what happens is that this initial tools palette becomes a couple of tools palettes. So you've got two tools palettes then, and there's different tools that are on here that we can begin to use. So going back to beginner, you'll see, for example, environment ends up in a new tool palette. So it pulls it down and it groups things a little bit differently. So today, what we're going to be doing is we are going to be focusing on some of those tools that are within that. And let's start with the top. The eraser, what the eraser allows us to do is to erase entire strokes. So if I come in here and I have it set to eraser and I choose a stroke, it removes that entire stroke. So whatever was created while you had the trigger pulled for doing that. So for example, there I've done two separate strokes. If I come in with the eraser, this one takes that entire stroke and that one takes that entire stroke. It doesn't take a partial stroke. It doesn't take just what you touch. It takes the entire stroke. Now, if you're wanting to separate part of that stroke, we'll cover that later on in another video with the snip and join tools. But what we're going to focus on today is this top set of tools. So the eraser allows you to erase entire strokes. The dropper allows you to come in and grab a stroke. And when you grab that stroke, you grab both the brush, the size, and the color. So you click on that, and let me go to another place just so that you can see. Again, clicking on the dropper, and I click on a specific stroke that I want to copy. So right in here, I've got this green stroke, and I've got this pink stroke, red stroke. Over here, I've got the blue stroke. And so I have the ability to grab any of those strokes. And when I do, it allows me to have the color, the brush, and let me see what brush I've actually got here. So I'm using the pedal brush on here, the color, the brush, and of course the size of that stroke. So what that allows us to do is, once we have a stroke and a color, which you always have a stroke, a brush and a color available as long as another tool isn't chosen. So the end of your brush controller lets you see what kind of stroke or what kind of tool you have selected. Turn it off and it automatically turns to whatever you have highlighted for the brush and color strokes. But once you have a brush and stroke selected, there's this Repaint tool. And the Repaint tool allows you to turn on and off different things. So the Recolor, you can turn it on or off. The Resize, on or off. And the Rebrush, on or off. So the Recolor, let's go to another place. And here, I'll just grab another tool here. I'll grab the fly and get into some strokes that aren't quite so closely together. So I've come to this new location, and I've got a number of very similar strokes but different colors because of the nature of how I was creating it. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to click on the dropper. I'm going to take this blue. I'm going to come over here and I'm going to select these. So say I wanted to turn these to that color. What I do, having picked the blue tool, and you can tell what your color is by looking at the end of your brush or at the palette. You can tell what stroke you have by looking at the brushes and seeing what you have highlighted. So this is a thick paint brush that I am using. And the size is dependent upon what you have set on your brush at that moment. So coming back to my repaint, I've got the option to turn on or off, changing the color, changing the size, and changing the brush. So, or recoloring. So if I turn on Recolor on and I come into this particular stroke, you notice that it's just the color that changes. If I turn off Recolor and I touch it again, nothing is happening, and that's because all of these are turned off. So I've got the repaint tool, but I've got to turn each of these three options on or off. Now you'll notice this jitter is under a square. That's a different brush, different function completely. So I'm going to leave Recolor off, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to change this to Resize. And so I'm going to come into those same strokes, and you notice how much bigger they get. And that's because of the size that I have selected when I have my brush selected. So if I come to very large and then I go to repaint and I choose to resize, it's going to go to the size relative to what I had selected when I was in my brush. So I'm going to turn that off, and I'm going to go back to this, and I'm going to undo that. So just so that I can demonstrate, I go to repaint, resize is on. That's a smaller, much smaller stroke. So when you are in your brush, whatever size you set that to, when you choose repaint, that's the size relative stroke, or the relative size of the stroke that's going to change. So if I turn on the recolor, it's going to change the color. If I turn on the resize, first off, that's back to the original. If I've got the resize and the recolor on, it's going to change to both the stroke and the size of the stroke and the color while retaining the same brush. Now, what I want to do, the third option that I have is Rebrush, and that allows me to change which stroke I'm going to be using. So at this point, that is the same brush. So what I want to do, I'm going to switch to a different brush. And let's go to something that's starkly different, just so that it's very visible. I'm going to switch to light. So my color is blue. My size is, right in there. I'm going to go back, repaint is on, and I choose Rebrush, and that's going to change that to the light stroke. It is using the original color because I didn't change the color. So in this case, it just changed the brush that I was using. But if I turn on the color and the size and the brush, it's going to change that, all three of those features. So what that allows you to do is go in and selectively change the color, the size, or the stroke that you're working with. So if I'm just wanting to change the color, I can click on that, and all of a sudden I've got a blue set of strokes. And again, it changed the color for that entire stroke. And that stroke is what this jitter was about. We'll go into jitter in another because there's too much to talk about in one video. So what we've talked about today is this top set of rows, the eraser, which allows you to erase one stroke at a time, the dropper, which allows you to choose a stroke. Actually, it allows you to choose a size, color, and brush. Then, based upon what you have available on your active palette, so in this case, it is that color, sort of a pinkish color. It's got the stroke or the thick paint brush, and then I can change this. I can come in and I can choose the Repaint tool, and I can choose which of those features I want to change. And I can change one, the other, and this is using the same stroke, so it didn't change that. Oh, that should be, oh, we've got the thick paint. So if I wanted to change that again back to light, I can choose to restroke, resize, and recolor. Does that make sense? Hope so. I personally don't like those strokes, so what I'm going to do, I'm going to go back and I'm going to grab the original stroke, and I'm going to reset all those, and it returns them to the strokes that they originally were. There you go. So that, summing it up, is the top row of tools in the Advanced Tools palette, the main one. We also covered the fly, which allows us the ability to fly towards another part of our drawing from as far away as we want. And so that is pressure sensitive. And so it allows you to choose how close you want to get. And then I see that I've got some extra stuff in there. Clear up that noise. And that is today's lesson. Thank you.